Hello, my name is Dr. Jackalyn Rainosek with DTP-Leadership Group, and this is Hot Topic Bold Talk by Dr. Jackalyn. I want to talk to you today about podcast 144. The title of it is No Kings, Militarization, Authoritarian Drift, and Fight for American Democracy. Now, I want to introduce it by talking about the Quantico dark stage that happened on a cool September morning in 2025 this week. Hundreds of America's top generals and admirals quietly filed into an auditorium at Marine Corps Base Quantico. They had been summoned by the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who gave them little advance notice and no agenda. Many had traveled halfway across the world from commands in Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. They expected a strategy briefing, perhaps an update on foreign operations. Instead, what they witnessed was something more akin to political theater. And not just any theater, but the staging grounds for an authoritarian vision of America. First, Hegseth, with fury and profanity, lectured men and women who had decades more military service than he did. He railed against fat generals, promised purges, and sneered at woke leaders. He boasted about renaming the Pentagon the Department of War. And then President Donald Trump took the stage. For more than an hour, he rambled through grievances, falsehoods, and threats. He joked that anyone who disliked his speech could leave, but warned that there goes your rank, there goes your future. He suggested that America's cities could serve as training grounds for the military, and he warned of the enemies within our country. The room stayed silent, as senior officers have been well trained to do. But outside the room, analysts and watchdogs sounded alarms. Tom Nichols wrote in The Atlantic that this was a violation of every standard of American civil-military relations. Public Citizen called it one step closer to outright tyranny. This was not an isolated incident. It was a accumulation of events. It's the latest chapter in the story of militarization, scapegoating, corruption, and authoritarian drift. And it's a story that ordinary Americans like you and me fully need to understand, that if we don't understand this, our democracy will not survive. So today I want to take you through that story. We'll look at how Trump and his allies are misusing the military, distorting the truth about violence and crime, weaponizing the law, and eroding our rights. But we'll also look at the other side, the resistance from lawyers filing lawsuits that block authoritarian power grabs, to grassroots groups defending voting rights, to watchdogs ongoing looking at corruption. And there's a growing moment to fight back, and that's what we need to do. This is a long journey, so it may be an hour, but I am asking you to go through it with me, because you don't want to have to read the 15 references that I've got for you. You want to know what's happening. And an hour is much less than what it takes to read my 15 references. The stakes are extremely high. because at the heart of this narrative I'm going to give you today is a question every American must answer. Will we remain a democracy under the rule of law, or will we become a nation where one man and his allies rule unchecked? I want to go to, and I've divided it into sections. So I want to talk about defense to war, the militarization of America. The renaming of the Department of Defense to the Department of War was more than symbolic. As Monica Duffy Toff of the Tufts University explains, the change signals an embrace of an aggressive, militaristic mindset that America's founders and later President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned against. That's what we're experiencing. We've been warned about this several times. The Department of War was the original name used from the founding until 1947, when Congress reorganized the armed services after World War II. The new name, Department of Defense, reflected a deliberate choice to emphasize a defensive posture, not an offensive one. It was about restraint, about saying America has immense power, but we use it carefully to protect, not to dominate. Trump's Trump's attitudes have reversed that distinction. It is part of a larger push to glorify force, to treat military as the first and best solution to every problem, even domestic dissent. At Quantico, this was on full display. Hegseth promised to purge leaders he considered weak. Trump suggested using American cities as training grounds, and both men made clear that loyalty to them personally was much more important than professional standards. Eisenhower's farewell address warned that the military industrial complex, the risk that Americans' immense defense establishment could accumulate, could be misplaced power if left unchecked. So the military industrial complex, which has been established, could be misplaced power if it's not checked, and it's not being checked. Today, that warning rang out again, because Trump is not just flirting with militarization abroad, he is actively importing it into American streets and into politics. So now let's look at the political violence and the big lie. Trump has justified most of his militarization by claiming that the radical left violence is out of control. After the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, he blamed the left and promised a crackdown. Most of the violence is on the left, he declared, but the data tells a different story. Research by the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, shows that in the last 5 years, right-wing extremists were responsible for more than half the political violence deaths in the U.S. 54%. Left-wing groups accounted for just 22%. Going back decades, the pattern is even clearer, excluding the 9/11 attacks. Right-wing terrorists are responsible for 63% of politically maneuvered murders since 1975, compared to only 10% from the left. Think of the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. Think of the El Paso Walmart massacre. Think of the Buffalo supermarket shooting, each motivated by white supremacist ideology. These are the deadliest political attacks of recent years, and they are all right-wing. Yet Trump never mentions them. He highlights isolated left attacks, but ignores the far right, more lethal reality of the right-wing extremists. Why? Because if he acknowledges the truth, it would undermine his narrative. Instead, he amplifies fear of the left, inflating small numbers into existential threats. As UCLA law professor Benjamin Rad points out, this amplification is political theater. It makes a handful of events feel like a nationwide emergency, and that in turn gives Trump cover to call for more crackdowns, more surveillance, and more deployment of force. It's a classic authoritarian move. Invent or exaggerate a threat, then use it to justify extraordinary powers. Let's look at the occupying of the cities in America. The National Guard is the political police group. The National Guard is the political police. Hear me. The rhetoric of dangerous cities has been matched by action, has repeatedly deployed or threatened to deploy the National Guard in cities such as Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Portland, and Memphis. They're all Democratic cities. Take D.C. The violent crime actually fell by 35% in 2024. The city was at a 30-year low. Yet Trump declared a crime emergency and seized control of the D.C. Police Department, flooding the street with Guard troops. Civil rights group called it what it was: political theater designed to show force and intimidate dissenters, not to address actual crime. On Portland, we'll see something else. Despite a 51% drop in homicide in early 2025, 51%, Trump sent in 200 Oregon National Guard troops under federal command. The state sued, calling it a wily pretense that violated the state's sovereignty. Veterans and intelligence officers warn the National Guard is not the president's political force. But that's exactly what Trump wants it to be. Lack of these deployments is about normalizing something fundamentally un-American, the sight of soldiers parading and patrolling American neighborhoods, treating cities as battlegrounds and residents as potential enemies. And each sets a precedent. If the president can declare a crime emergency where none exists and use it to seize local law enforcement, then no city is safe from political occupation. So wake up. That's the reason I'm doing this podcast. Next section. Authoritarian consolidation, the race against time. David Fromm describes Trump's project as a race, an attempt to consolidate authoritarian control before public opinion turns decisively against him, since public opinion is turning against him. Tariffs are driving up prices, job growth has stalled, vaccine rollouts have led to the worst measles outbreak in decades. Corruption scandals like the alleged cash bribe to border czar Tom Homan are eroding trust in Trump and the Congress. Polls show that most Americans now view Trump as corrupt, and his approval rankings are sinking. That creates urgency for Trump. Like an over-leveraged businessman racing to refund before the collapse, He must not lock down power quickly. That means pressing Attorney General Pam Bondi to prosecute political enemies of his. It means redrawing district maps mid-decade, as in Missouri. It means weakening voting rules before the 2026 midterms. Autocrats rely not just on fantasizing or being fanatical about something. They're looking for opportunists, people who will go along because it's profitable or convenient. But when the tide turns, those opportunities can abandon ship. Trump knows this. That's why he's pressing so hard, so fast, to entrench himself before opportunists calculate that the risk outweighs the rewards. Let's look at the attack on rights, and let's look at judges and juries. Robert Rich warns that Trump is acting as a judge and jury. In the Caribbean, U.S. forces attacked boats alleged to be smuggling drugs, killing at least 17 people. There was no trial, no proof, just Trump's word. In Louisiana, immigration agents detained an individual that was a lawful permanent resident for 104 days because of a political speech he gave. Trump himself admitted the arrest was political retaliation. These are not isolated abuses. They are part of a broader plan, the elimination of due process, the use of state power to silence dissent, the message that anyone who opposes Trump risks prison, deportation, or even death. If you think this cannot happen, Rich says, think again, because it is happening. And once you accept that the president can unilaterally decide who is guilty, there is no line he cannot cross. Legal restraints. Where are they? Yet as Trump consolidates power, a legal resistance is rising. Lawyers like Norm Essen, groups like Public Citizen and Democracy Forward, unions and Democratic state attorney generals have filed hundreds of lawsuits. More than 100 have succeeded in blocking or delaying Trump's actions, from restoring funding to AmeriCorps to protecting unaccompanied minors to halting illegal tariffs. The courts have been a battleground where Trump has repeatedly been forced to retreat. These cases take time. Some wins are overturned on appeal. Others stall at the Supreme Court, which is dominated by Trump supporters. But each lawsuit exposes corruption, slows authoritarian advance, and keeps stories in the public eye. So read and listen, and I will give you more in the podcasts I create. As Essen puts it, Trump versus the rule of law is the fight of this century. This legal fight is not glamorous. It is painstaking, technical, often invisible, but it matters. Without it, authoritarian power would already be far more entrenched. Well, let's look at the economic fallout of tariffs and betrayal by Trump. Even Trump's supposed allies, the working class voters who believed his promise, are suffering. In Wisconsin, an aluminum foundry workers who overwhelmingly supported Trump now face layoffs because of tariffs. The CEO has warned that the company's input costs have tripled, demands have collapsed, and orders are down 40%. The very people Trump promised to help are losing their livelihoods. And yet fear of retaliation keeps corporate America largely silent. CEOs know that criticizing Trump could bring government punishment. So they bite their tongue even as inflation rises and jobs vanish. This is how authoritarian economics works. Loyalty is rewarded, dissent is punished, and ordinary workers pay the price. And then let's get to gerrymandering. I know I've talked about it a lot, but let me show you some other things about gerrymandering and how it takes away our democracy. Let's take Missouri. Missouri's attempt to redraw the congressional districts mid-decade blatantly violates its own constitution and is part of a national strategy. Trump aligned politicians by pressuring states to manipulate maps before 2026. The goal is clear: entrench one-party rule, delude your urban voters, and insulate power from authority and accountability. So it's really insulating power from accountability. They're trying to get inappropriate authority. Legal groups like the Campaign Legal Center are fighting back, just as they did in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Utah. But the danger is real if courts fail to stop these unconstitutional maps. Voters could lose their most basic democratic power, the ability to choose their representatives. Now, the commander-in-chief is not okay. Let's face it, Trump is disintegrating. At Quantico, it wasn't just the authoritarian message that alarmed observers. It was Trump himself. He rambled incoherently, confused dates, fabricated events, and made bizarre statements about submarines and battleships. He seemed unprepared, erratic, and truly disconnected from reality. As Tom Nichols put it, the most sympathetic observer had to conclude that the commander-in-chief was not okay. For military officers trained to take every president's word seriously, this was chilling. What happens when the person with authority to launch nuclear weapons shows clear signs of inability? It is a question no democracy should have to ask, yet is one we as Americans are facing. So the race to save our democracy. Gary Kasparov, the former chess champion turned democracy activist, calls it the race to save America's democracy. Trump has already tried to overturn one election. He has already used troops against his own people. He's already weaponized law enforcement against critics, and he's already moving to undermine the 2026 midterms. The Constitution is not self-enforcing. It is a paper. Unless citizens like you and me, institutions and leaders fight, we're going to see our democracy disappear. The fight is happening now. It's in the courts, it's in the state legislature, it's in civic groups that you see every city, it's in watchdog organizations, in the streets. It's uneven, it's imperfect, sometimes discouraging, but it is real. And it matters what each of us do. So my conclusion, America has no kings. Eisenhower's warning rings out today. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenship can compel the proper balance between military power and peaceful goals. I'm going to repeat Eisenhower again. Eisenhower warned warning rings out today. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper balance between military power and peaceful goals. What we saw at Quantico was not balance. It was the naked ambition of men who see power as the birthright and the military as their tool. But America was founded on the rejection of kings. And the fight now is not against one man, but against the authoritarian impulse itself, the belief that might make them right, that loyalty to Trump's law and the dissent is treason. We cannot allow that to happen. They are not right. We do not need to be loyal to Trump and the administration, nor the congressional representatives that have been bought by him. And those who dissent are not exhibiting treason. The resistance comes from legal, civic, democratic organizations that show that Americans will have the tools to push back. Courts can block illegal orders. States can sue. Voters can demand fair maps. Citizens can rally. The question is whether we will. Because democracy does not die all at once. It erodes piece by piece until one day you wake up and realize it's gone. That is my warning to you. That is the urgency, and that is the call to action. So it's time to repeat. No kings, not here, not now, not ever. It's a very important message, and it may not have lasted an hour, but it is very important for you to consider it. I am giving you the 15 references I've used for this podcast, and I'm asking you to support me on Patreon because I'm making every effort to educate you about what is happening in our country. Thank you very much for listening.